Welcome to today's episode. It's the end of the week, and like I said, I'll be off this schedule for next 2 weeks. So for about 2 weeks. This is the last episode. I'll see you back in August, but let's get started with our today's highlights. The first one is from Anthro-Vision. In a curious way, in China, AI facial recognition technologies highlight the individual, a hallmark of Western culture and traditions. So it's really curious that this came up because I had a conversation about this with someone yesterday. And I couldn't remember at that time. I couldn't remember which book that was from, and the conversation was about this notion of uh, how AI technologies have a different sense of privacy depending on the culture. So, for example, where I live in the North American region, Western countries, it's facial recognition and biometric security is considered a invasion of privacy. Uh, and I'm like having lived here for few years now, it's like I'm inclined towards the same notion. Whereas what the author studied in this case in China, people actually didn't mind. In fact, it was an opposite effect. I don't really remember if they appreciated it or what was it, or like if it as in the feeling that um, the outcome of being surveilled or having this AI facial recognition technologies to highlight the individual, that had an opposite feeling in Eastern countries. Like for example, the author is talking about China over here, and the person I was talking to, that was a similar thing. It was. I'm trying not to give away the location, but it was a very similar thing where uh, there is biometric security just to get into their own house, into their own residential building. They have to go through a biometric security scanning, and that's okay for people there. So yeah, it was. It's really curious that this came up today. Move on. Moving on. Getting things done. People often mistake my advice as an advocacy for radical minimalism. On the contrary, if throwing something away is uncomfortable for you, you should keep it. Otherwise, you would have attention of the fact that you don't have something you might want or need. Okay, the author is pointing out that GTD philosophy might seem to many people that it's advocating minimalism, that keep your tasks to minimal, get rid of things that you don't need, and so on. But the author is just building a system, and that system can handle a huge number of items. In fact, today with software, if you have a software to-do list and all of that, the list is really unlimited. It's just a system, and the only criteria of the system is that it should be reliable, so that it surfaces the items when you need them. That's the only criteria. The length of the list is not a criteria at all for the system to work. So yeah, that's this highlight. Moving on, working backwards. At last, we realized that all this cross team communication didn't really need refinement at all. It needed elimination. Where was it written in stone that every project had to involve so many separate entities? It wasn't just that we had the wrong solution in mind. Rather, we'd been trying to solve the wrong problem altogether. We didn't yet have the new solution, but we finally grasped the true identity of our problem: the ever expanding cost of coordination among teams. So this realization, this outcome might seem little what's the word for that? I'm missing the word. It might seem little surprising, astonishing that really, you want to avoid communication, you want to avoid collaboration. But then, when you realize that the author is really talking about cross-team communication, not the communication within the team that is still encouraged, but the cross-team communication is where problems start to appear. And if you don't have a protocol around that, what does it mean for cross-team communication? Are there teams which are supposed to be closer than others? But if that is the case, if that is something that is allowed, then by Conway's law, we also have the fact that those the software components will be quite close to each other, or in other words, they'll start getting coupled to each other. So what we come to realize with this is that with eliminating cross-team communication and replacing it, so the solution, like the author says, at this point they don't have the solution, but the solution was to have a documented contract. kind of like having API contracts between components. So a documented contract that this is how you're going to interface with each other's each team's components. If you have that contract and if you're following that, you're okay. And those contracts should not be broken. Like that's the only rule here. Then so you don't need to worry about communication. You just need to worry about making sure that the endpoints or the API is documented. It is maintained. Those are the things that you need to ensure. And as long as you do that, you don't really need to talk to each other that often. It's you can maintain your own speed, your own pace. Each team can maintain their own pace, and build the overall system. Each component may have a completely different deployment schedule, and the system is still completely reliable. That's the point, and that's what the authors here found in Amazon, and we have seen this in many industries since then. For example, when decoupled Drupal became a popular thing, many people just jumped on that, not realizing when to use it and when not to use it. And of course, today we know better, when is a good time to use this. Interestingly, I just had this conversation with someone over a PHP meetup the other day about how a lot of these technologies are getting decoupled, and we are seeing composable architectures and all of that. And that might replace all of our technology, but I still believe that it all depends on the team. So if what we really want to avoid is the cross team interaction, the overhead in the interaction, the overhead in the communication, and uncertainties, which can lead to these software components getting coupled with each other, their releases being tied up with each other. They have to be replaced with, by eliminating communication in the first place, and then by replacing them with contracts of some sort. So yeah, it's a deep topic. Again, I feel like I can keep talking about it, but we don't have the time. So moving on. Drive. In business, we tend to obsess over the how, as in, here's how to do it. Yet we rarely discuss the why, as in, here's why we are doing it. But it's often difficult to do something exceptionally well if we don't know the reasons we are doing it in the first place. People at work are thirsting for context, yearning to know that what they do contributes to a larger whole. And a powerful way to provide the context is to spend a little less time telling how and a little more time showing why. I think it's explanatory. Sometimes, in management, there is this thing that, you don't need to know the why, just do what I tell you to do. And of course, that's not how work gets done today. Fortunately, industries have moved on since this paradigm of, just do what you're told, and essentially treating adults as children. So, why? It's a very important thing. And that's what motivates people more than anything else. So, let's move on. The last lecture, fundamentals. That was a great gift Coach Graham gave us. Maybe it's a typo. Fundamentals, fundamentals, fundamentals. As a college professor, I've seen this as one lesson for so many kids ignore, always to their detriment. You've got to get the fundamentals down, because otherwise the fancy stuff is not going to work. This is something I firmly believe. You want to start with something, learn the fundamentals. Or I would tweak it now to say that, you want to start with something, get started, but don't forget the fundamentals. You have to get to that. Sometimes, there are these two extremes at play in myself, where I focus so much on fundamentals that I never get started. So I'm tweaking this thing. Fundamentals are still important. They're critical if you want to keep doing something, but not at the expense of starting. If with software especially, it's very easy to just get started without worrying about the fundamentals in the first place. And that's the trap. If it's so easy to get started, it's so easy to get some way without understanding fundamentals, that before you know it, you're too deep into it and you don't really understand what's going on. When you hit a critical problem and you're not able to solve it. So yeah, there needs to be a balance. So moving on. Extreme ownership. On any team, in any organization, all responsibility for success and failure rests with the leader. The leader must own everything in his or her own world. There is no one else to blame. The leader must acknowledge mistakes and admit failures, take ownership of them, and develop a plan to win. We have come across this earlier as well, and it just points that the leadership job is not easy. It's about taking ownership, even though it's not really your personal fault. So it's that notion that I'm involved with whatever the team is doing. That's my responsibility, and I have to develop a plan to win, considering all the possible considering the solution or situation holistically, from a technical point of view, or from an emotional point of view, or from a psychological point of view, and physical point of view, and so on. Yeah, let's move on. Originals. Moving first is a tactic, not a goal. Peter Thiel writes in 0 to 1. Being the first mover doesn't do you any good if someone else comes along and unseats you. So this is from the section of the book where the author talks about, being original doesn't mean that you're the first in your field. And a good way to highlight this is, the phrase over here, moving first is a tactic. It's just a tactic, it's not the goal. So even if you fail at being the first in that market, doesn't matter. There are many examples where, the second person who came into the market actually won the um, overall market. Okay, I'm at a loss of words today. So yeah, it's that's the emphasis over here, that we have this tendency that, if we were not the first, we can't do anything about it, we have lost the opportunity. That's simply not true. Moving on to measure what matters, where OKR scores pinpoint what went wrong or right in the work and how the team might improve. Self-assessments drive a superior goal-setting process for the next quarter. There are no judgments, only learnings. So um, this whole process of OKRs, and there are scores, of course, and that they pinpoint, what went wrong, what went right, and how, to what extent did you achieve your OKRs in the first place. Self assessments drive goal setting for the next quarter, because you are looking back at your goals and saw what worked, what didn't work, and you are able to frame your next goals better in the context of a better learning, the whole experience that you've had working on the OKR. Now in that context, you're able to frame your goals better. So yeah, there are no judgments, only learnings. Then again, I think measure what matters. Leaders must get across the why as well as the what. The people need more than milestones for motivation. They are thirsting for meaning, to understand how their goals relate to the mission, and the process can't stop with unveiling top line OKRs at a quarterly all hands meeting. As LinkedIn CEO Jeff Weiner likes to say, when you're tired of saying it, people are starting to hear it. So multiple things over here. We already discussed the why versus the how thing little earlier in the highlight from the book Drive. So we already discussed that part. So I don't feel like I need to repeat it. Saying the same thing. Why is important, and the other part of it, that when you're tired of saying it, people are starting to hear it. I feel that there is this research. It's a very popular thing that when you they've found in the study that managers need to say something about 7 to 8 times before people acknowledge having learnt about it. So that's when people start hearing it, when you're repeating it for like 6 or 7 times. So yeah, it's kind of like a fact of management, fact of life, fact of our working culture, that fact of our interactions and our communication capabilities, that yeah, that we need to do something like this. So moving on. Cues. The moment we touch someone or someone touches our chemistry changes. Touch creates the potent chemical oxytocin. As we have learned, oxytocin plays a complicated role in our body. But in interactions, it increases trust, warmth, and rapport. Even small touches, a high five, a fist bump, or a pat on the back produce oxytocin and encourage trust. It's highly factual. I don't really need to say anything over here. So yeah, I think that with that we move on, and we are at the end of highlights today. So it's been a good day, with the highlights. I think it was fun today as well, and going on a 2 week break, like I said before. So see you after then. Have a good day. Bye.